Good afternoon, Mr. Ennis, my fellow classmates. I'm Wilfred Mitchell. Today I will be doing a presentation on an article that I found on pbs.org. The author of the article is Kenneth Doka, who is a senior consultant for the Hospice Foundation of America and a professor of gerontology at the College of New Rochelle in New York. The reason I chose this article is because I believe both the author and the source of the article is reputable. In the article, Doka poses 5 questions. I will list these questions, then answer each with my own opinion. However, the explanation for each question is listed in the article. Number 1, how do children understand death? Doka said that children tend to view death through their own perspective. I believe that this is true. As a child, I would view death as unrealistic. But as I get older, I tend to get these attachments to the deceased, especially if they're a close relative or friends. Number 2, how do children grieve? Doka said children grieve in ways similar to that and different from adults. Like adults, children experience grief physically, emotionally, cognitively, spiritually, and behaviorally. As with adults, they experience grief as a roller coaster. In my opinion, children grieve through regressive behavior, sleep patterns, and changes in grades. In my personal experience with death in my family, the first thing that affected my sleep cycle was my sleep cycle. That's the first thing that affected me. Then there's my grades. Every time I would lose somebody within the family, my grades would deteriorate. So definitely it affects my grades, the way I deal with grief. Number 2, how should I discuss death with a child? Doka said it's important for adults to be selective in the way they explain death to children, while adding that honesty and straightforwardness is the best way to deal with such crisis. I believe that you should always be upfront with a child. Speak with facts and concrete ideas instead of metaphorical ones. Children do not understand metaphorical terms. Always let it be known that expressing oneself is important. Whether they do it through tears, laughter, but also provide that support for the child. A shoulder to lean on, per se. Number 3, should a child visit someone in the hospital? Should they go to a funeral? Doka explained that children should have the option to decide whether or not they want to sit through a visitation, but to ensure that someone is there to properly explain the procedures occurring at the funeral service, if and when asked by the child, of course. When I was a child, I was very curious-minded. I wanted to visit the hospital, especially if it's someone close within the family or a friend. I wanted to know what occurred, what happened, how it happened, and what are the results, and how can we fix it. If it's dealing with death, I want to know what happened. It helps to understand the importance of doctors in society, in my opinion. Number 4, what does a grieving child need? Others might intentionally, unintentionally neglect the child during grief because they're going through their personal grief. So it is beneficial and important that a child has the opportunity for grief counseling, grief groups, grief camps to support a child. I believe that children should receive mandatory grief counseling session. If it's evident that that child has a close connection with their family member or deceased, then grief counseling should definitely be mandatory. This is important because even though I showed no signs of complicated grief, I could have been masking my grievance. So it's very important that that child has the support when needed. Coming from a third world country, well, it is very difficult for someone or a child to find such grief counseling groups. So to help with that situation, well, the adults will come into play, the funeral directors, in providing such support. So that is important for each child to have that support system. And this article that I've done today, I've very much enjoyed. And for the most part, I could relate to Doka. I share some of the same views in that children need that support. I'm Wilfred Mitchell. Thanks for enjoying my show. Thanks.